Chris, I think we're good to go, I would say. But you need to turn on your mic.
Hello. 36% of Europe's CO2 emissions stem from our buildings. And in some countries, it's more than 40%. And the vast majority of those emissions, 80%, come from the means we use to provide heat and hot water. So if we're to meet the target of net zero by 2050, in just 28 years' time, reducing emissions from heating is absolutely crucial. EHI is the Association of the European Heating Industry and represents the major heating equipment makers. Today, it publishes a new report on heating market trends across Europe. I'm Chris Davis, a former member of the European Parliament and now a senior advisor with Rud Pedersen Public Affairs in Brussels. And I'm going to be discussing what the report says about the scale of the challenge ahead and what we can do to meet it. I'm joined by Klaus Jesser, chairman of EHI, and for many years, UK and Ireland director of the Vaillant Group. Peter Liese, long-serving member of the European Parliament, I think first elected back in 1994, and team leader or coordinator for the European People's Party in the Environment Committee. He's also leading in the Parliament on the European Commission's current proposals to include heating and transport within the scope of the emissions trading system. Moving from policymaker to practitioner, we have Ivan Ivankovic, head of energy and climate for the city of Zagreb, which with 800,000 people hosts almost a quarter of the entire population of Croatia, and even has the job of somehow delivering the emission reductions from his city's building stock. He's also playing a leading role in the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. And last but not least, Federica Sabati, Secretary General of EHI. Now, let's turn to the new report. Klaus, what does it tell us about the changing ways in which we're heating our homes and our buildings?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for the introduction. Yeah, I think we have an interesting report which is based on the year 2020 and shows quite a significant change and changes in the market. And we just prepared 3 or 4 charts to illustrate that there is much more information in the detailed report. But as a summary, I'd like to show you the main developments here. As you can see, there is the vast majority of the European heating market is gas and oil fired, and that shift is and that structure is changing. In 2015, the overall market, always excluding the volumes in the UK, were 101.5 million space heaters installed. In 2019, you see we had almost 106 million. So the installed pool is growing, and the inefficient share of appliances is reducing. So from 69% in 2015 to 58. Still, which means still 60% of the installed stock is inefficient based on our ERP labeling in the red or dark red or yellow area. So that is the big challenge when it comes to transforming our heating market. And in order to meet the first target steps in 2030, we have to speed up the renovation rate, which means insulation and isolation of houses, as well as efficient heating equipment with renewable energies. That is, I think, the big challenge with regard to the set targets by the EU Commission. The next chart, please, which goes a little bit more deep. It also shows that I mentioned in the introduction that we have a growing dynamic in electric heat. As you can see, the heat pump market was over years a very flat, stagnant niche market in the European heating. That has changed. We see, can we go back once more, please? We saw from 18 to 19, 44% growth, and from 19 to 20, 14% growth. And we have to keep in mind 2020 was a year of a lot of lockdowns, total chaos in the market. In different European markets, we had a collapse of the market. So 2020 is definitely not the best year to compare with regard to growth numbers. Next chart, please. And the other significance is that the gas condensing boiler market, still the majority of the market, 4.5 million units, is leveling off. The growth is 1.7% from 18 to 19, and it's minus 3.5% from 19 to 20. Again, keeping in mind that 2020 was an unusual year with all the lockdowns in the market. Next chart. So the interesting part is now 2021. In 2021, the market for heat pumps exceeded the 1 million unit market number, which is quite a significant growth compared to former years of 71%. So the strong growth indicates that the electrical heat will take over more and more of the market, not only in new build, but also in renovation, when housing stock, installations, and heating systems allows it. The market for gas condensing boilers in 2021 was 5.4 million. That was a growth of 13% to 2019. And it is a solid performance. And we compared it to 2019 again, because 2020 was a distorted year with all the lockdowns we were faced with. So we see quite a strong shift in the strong shift and transformation in the heating appliance market, and all the production and industries are reflecting that with their investments. So a lot of companies are investing in production capacities for heat pumps and development of green gas appliances. Next chart, please. So the technology, as I said, is heat pumps, electrical, also hybrids, combination of gas appliances or other heating devices with heat pumps, also thermally driven heat pumps. And of course, the industry is investing in H2-ready boilers, meaning that starting at a given point in the future, only gas appliances should be and will be introduced into the market, which would be able to be converted to hydrogen-ready, 100% hydrogen. That's the plan, and all members of our industry are investing heavily to be prepared to achieve that. Next chart. So I think the challenges our industry is faced with is, one is a capacity as well as a capability of installers to support and carry out this huge transformation in our market. There's also, of course, a financial burden on everybody in the chain, starting from the industry up to homeowners and installers. With this transformation, industry has to invest enormously in training and further education of our direct customers, installers, in order to be able to install these more complex and more complicated systems in a way that end users will be happy with the result. We also are faced with a pretty diverse energy infrastructure in different European countries. Just one number from Germany. When we talk about electrification of the heating market, today's electrical peak, pretty constant over the months, is 80 gigawatt capacity. In January, February, the gas infrastructure heating capacity required for peak demand is 230 gigawatt. So we see here a big challenge on the electrical infrastructure, but also the value we have with a gas grid as a significant energy storage system. When it comes to time, I mentioned already, speed is of essence in order to meet the first step of our target setting, 2030. And here we can only say that we need an increase of renovation in the building stock in order to meet these targets. And as I mentioned, the industry is heavily investing in heat pump production capacities, hybrids production, and also in research and development to have products available that would be able to combust and burn hydrogen in the future if there is a hydrogen network in the heating market available. That should it be as a short introduction of the report, and then I think, Chris, I give back to you.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. You emphasize, of course, the growth in heat pumps, but yet gas condensing boilers are still outselling them by fivefold. Now, gas condensing boilers are, of course, much more efficient than the older boilers. How much more efficient are they? I mean, what reduction in emissions do we get from using a gas condensing boiler?
Yeah, if we compare the efficiency under stable state and comparable, the condensing boiler, if installed in the correct way, should deliver a 12 to 14% better efficiency than a conventional heating appliances, always depending how old the appliance is. We have an average age, for example, when you exchange an old oil boiler with a gas condensing boiler, the saving might be even bigger. But if you have a gas boiler which is only 10 years or 15 years old with an efficient modern condensing boiler, we're talking about 10 to 15%. Okay,
well, good, but clearly not enough to meet a net zero Absolutely. Target.
Yes.
And I just wondered, I mean, how long do these products survive? Because, you know, are we locking ourselves into a technology which is going to make it impossible to reach net zero?
Yeah. I mean, this is a concern which we understood, and therefore I mentioned that the industry is working on appliances which we want to introduce into the market starting 26 or 27, when the Commission is supporting that idea, which could be converted to hydrogen. So we are not blocking the market with appliances we are bringing into the market today, because we have to face reality. We have 100 million gas appliances installed, and with the time span in front of us, it will be impossible to change everything to electric heat. So there is no silver bullet. So we need all technologies in order to meet the requirements.
Now, when we look at heat pumps, I think Sweden is the outrider, and it's clearly heat pumps are now dominating, I think, the market for new heating equipment in that country. But you take Belgium, a country, of course, where the European laws are made. The figures are, Belgium 2020, 200,000 gas condensing boilers installed, just 15,000 heat pumps. It's a big gap there still. And of course, presumably the cost of heat pumps is still the most significant factor in preventing their deployment.
Yes, I agree. And as I said, we have a diverse structure in Europe, but we see quite a dynamic in markets, in particular, where incentives are being offered. When I think about Germany, there is a significant growth in heat pump market last years and the years before. Same applies to the UK, where the heat pump market unexpectedly grew faster than all partners in the market expected.
And you're a manufacturer. Do you expect the cost of heat pumps to come down significantly?
Well, they will come down with a scale effects, but of course, a heat pump with a complex structure and also the size of the product itself will not meet, in the foreseeable future at least, the cost of a gas boiler, which is just a technology which is a mass production and is less complex than a heat pump technology.
But just moving away just from concentrating on one technology alone, across the board, the heating industry, manufacturers like yourselves, you've got the technology that's needed to meet that net zero target. If only it can be installed, if the rate of renovation can be accelerated. Yeah,
I would say the technology is there to meet the targets. The question is whether the infrastructure on the energy supply side will be able to fulfill their share there. So if also the electrical grid needs in certain markets an improvement in order to convert a market from today major gas to electricity. The same applies for gas, by the way. So that is a big challenge, and of course preparing the market with our partners in the market with installers. These are the big bottlenecks in order to achieve what we want to achieve.
Indeed, we'll come on to that. But maybe the problem also is not simply the heating technology, but the buildings. I mean, across Europe, we have too many buildings that are poorly insulated. So we're spending money heating the birds and the sky instead of heating ourselves. Yes,
yeah. I mean, that's as I said, that is it's not only the heating installation, it's also the infrastructure of the building and the fabric of the building, which requires attention and money.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, Peter Liese, can I turn to you? And the European Commission, as you know, of course you know, is proposing that buildings and transport should be included within the scope of the emissions trading system. Well, you and I have discussed this in the past, but good idea or bad idea?
It's a very good idea, and in fact, I'm convinced if this idea is not implemented, we will just not make it. Innovative heating technologies are key for the transition to carbon neutrality, and they are also key to reduce our dependency from Russia. I had looked at many figures and discussed with many experts. The main problem of our energy crisis now, with the high prices, even in the electricity prices, is our dependency from Russia. And we need to reduce this. We need to decarbonize and reduce our dependency from imports of oil and gas. And, for the moment, as I fully share your view, Chris, we need to put more emphasis on heat pumps. It's true they cannot be installed tomorrow everywhere in Europe, but the Swedish example is a good one. And the problem is that we are increasing prices on electricity, and that creates not only problems, challenges for the citizens, low-income citizens, but also for the transition. When you install a heat pump or buy an electric vehicle, and then you see your electricity bill that is very, very high, because we have a lot of taxes and fees, and we put also, we always wanted it, Chris, you don't misunderstand me. I'm in favor of the ETS, and we managed together to bring it up to higher prices. But if we have an ETS only on electricity and not on gas and oil, the effect will be that heat pumps are artificially made less affordable for people. So we need to have some level playing field, and also have an ETS on heating and transport. Okay. And what is more important, to reduce the revenues, to use the revenues. Not only the Social Climate Fund is important, but also the rest of the revenues. They should enable people to install modern heating system, and then we can make it. If we do it only with command and control, I think it's impossible. And if we have a very, very ambitious ETS 1 and no ETS 2, we punish people that do the right thing, which go to climate-friendly electric solutions. And we shouldn't punish those people, we should encourage them.
Very interesting, all sorts of issues you just raised there. But Peter, can you just explain, if buildings are included within the ETS, what effect will that have? What effect will it have on reducing emissions? And what effect will it have on the bills householders have to pay?
So first of all, it will raise revenues. So it will give member states and Europe. So we have this social climate fund, that's 25% of the revenues, 75% are with the member states. These revenues can enable people to insulate their houses, to install heat pumps or other environmental friendly heating systems. And that is key.
Who pays, Peter? I mean, is this going to be a tax on
It's like with
households?
the ETS1, we have, for example, the electricity producers, the utilities that pay. In ETS2, it will be the producers of oil and gas that pay. And in both situations, of course, these producers can either decarbonize their production or pass through the costs, and both will happen. So there will be an incentive to include more carbon neutral fuels, and there will also be a rising bill for consumers, and that's why this social climate fund and the targeted use of the revenues is so important. But it's in principle the same system with ETS1 and ETS2. It's not the consumer that is directly hit, but it's the one that produces the source of energy.
But there was no easy answer to these things. You know, gas prices are very high. People were concerned. As you say, I mean, the money's got to come from somewhere. But Pascal Canfin, chair of the Environment Committee, as you well know, he's on record as saying that this is a very bad idea, a big mistake, he says. Its effects on CO2 emissions will be between limited and very limited. Not enthusiastic, is he? And maybe he's right. Maybe regulation is a better way of achieving the same goals.
Yeah, I would be interested in listening to the experts here. What kind of regulation can really cover all the opportunities? Because every building is different. Every heating system is different. And you need to make a very individual decision how to reduce CO2 in your building. That can be a heat pump, it can be a hybrid system, it can be more insulation, it can be all sorts of things. And to regulate this from Brussels, that we have a very detailed plan for every building in Europe, I just cannot imagine. And one thing is important, Chris, this week I spoke to a high official from the UK, because some colleagues argue, especially the Greens argue, we better have national CO2 price, not a European one. And you know, the UK is even considering to come back and connect their national ETS with our, because that will bring costs down. And this is a strong argument also in the heating sector to have a European approach and not a national one, because when we do it together, it will be more cost efficient. So national systems, like some argue, like the Greens, will make it more expensive. European systems will make it more cost efficient. So when we speak about high energy prices, we should do it European. And when we speak about the current crisis, it's very important. Any intervention in ETS1 will immediately increase consumers' electricity bill, immediately, because the market exists. ETS2 is to be introduced in 5 years, and then people have time to prepare. So we can help them with the transition. With the ETS1, we have an immediate shock, and we cannot help people because it's just too short time. So I think it's a nonsense that Pascal Canfin argues for more ambitious ETS1 and against ETS2. And many people in Renew, your former group, as you know, are of my opinion and not of Pascal's opinion.
Okay, well, you also tempted me to go down the Brexit route, but I shall avoid that. Just tell me. No, I'm
it's
not
just a good argument that if we work together, it's less expensive. Now, even the British realize it.
Of course, you know I endorse that view. But tell me, I'm not following what's going on in the Environment Committee. So I've said what the chair is saying. How do you think the debate's going to go? What's going to be the outcome of the negotiations?
It looks not so good because formally those responsible in S&D Group and Greens have suggested to completely delete the ETS2, and in Renew the coordinator together with Pascal has proposed to limit it to commercial buildings. which I think is not really logical, because why should rich people with big houses not be covered? So we can do something on low income families, but why should we not cover luxury big houses? But most important is, behind the scenes, there's a lot of momentum, and many individual colleagues that are influential in ENVI are looking for compromises. And we have compromise proposals from the NGOs. So the NGOs are more in favor now than the Greens, and that will be interesting. So if I make a compromise proposal based on NGO proposals, I would like to see the Greens voting against. That would be an interesting story.
Okay, politics to one side then for a moment. But Peter, please feel free to come back into the discussion. I will be coming back to you, of course, later. Federica, Klaus touched upon the matter of installers. Now, your report makes clear that installers are absolutely crucial in shaping the decisions being made by householders as to what equipment they should use in their buildings. But it also highlights the fact that there are huge weaknesses in the current arrangements. For example, in France, apparently, your report says that only 25% of installers are trained also to install not simply gas boilers, but also heat pumps. In Germany, just 10% of installers are trained to do this. In the UK, just 2%. I mean, clearly, if we're looking at the whole range of technologies, the installers need to be able to advise a householder what's best for their circumstances. What do we do about this?
Yes, and we are studying what to do about it, because of course yeah, we've made an analysis of what are the main barriers for the installation of, to handle actually this renovation wave, which is not only about heat pumps. In fact, it's about all technologies, all modern technologies. And then for heat pumps, this is particular burden or barrier, because they are just different, like Klaus was saying, just very different technology from what most installers have been used to install. So we are studying what to do. The issue is very complex. First of all, as a description of the industry, manufacturers and installers are two different businesses. The installers are actually our clients, our customers. Yeah, so there is a special relationship. They are the gateway to our technologies. In certain cases, they are also the roadblock. I think that in general, for what we can see today, we have an issue of quantity. We are missing just a number of installers to handle all this renovation wave that needs to come, and that also the Commission has announced will come. We just don't have enough of them. And then for those who are in the job, there's an issue of upskilling. And probably this will lead us to different solutions. So on the one hand, you will need to look at the system of education and professional training, which is very often not even national, but specific for a region. If I'm thinking of Germany, perhaps it's, every land might have a different approach to it. So there's an issue of how to entice more people, young people, to get into this business, and make them agents of the energy transition in buildings. I think there is a momentum at the moment. Climate protection, climate change is an issue that all young people have taken on board as a cause close to their heart. Perhaps that's something that we can use to entice more people to enter this business. And you have a second part of the challenge, which may be different, and the actors that work on it may be different. And that is those that are already in the job and that will be in the job for the next 10, 20 years need to be trained into new technologies and keep being trained in new technology, because the innovation, like Klaus was mentioning, is ongoing. There's more and more technologies. There's hybridization of technologies, digitalization. So in terms of what skills are needed, there's different things that are coming up and that we are innovating in, and therefore all this needs to be taught, and installers, yeah, need to embrace all of this. So it's probably two ways that we need to think this challenge. But it certainly is one of the main issues that we need to deal with in order to speed up the renovation of buildings, particularly for heat pumps.
Klaus, at the moment, I don't know how this works, but I imagine that manufacturers train installers to install their own equipment. And yet, if we take the approach that Frederica is suggesting, then they need to be able to offer impartial advice about what is best for the householder, perhaps.
Yeah, but I think Peter Liese mentioned it, that basically every house is the system which has to be evaluated. And the installer is the only company which is locally available and can do that job. We as system offerers in our industry, producing all kinds of technologies, offer these to our clients, and they are communicating the right solution in the building for the end user. I give you an example how that has changed already. Again, in the UK, we used to have 80% of our training facilities, and we were training 20,000 installers every year. 80% was training on gas condensing boilers, installation and fault finding, all this. That has changed to 70% heat pump training now. Meanwhile, also a lot online, at least the first part, the theoretical part. So new technology helps us to tackle that challenge, and we are overwhelmed with requests of training, and all other manufacturers will be faced with similar issue. So there is an awful lot of dynamics in there. The proof of the pudding is always at the final is the cost of the installation. Are people willing to spend the extra money for a renewable heating system compared to just changing what they used to have? And here, I think the incentive programs have to play a role in the installed stock. I mean, the new build you can really regulate via all the regulations, and it has worked. I mean, 10 years ago, the gas had a market share of 60–70% in new build, at least in Germany. I think that has changed dramatically. I don't think that the new build today still will be installed with a gas boiler. So that's heat pump. But the installed stock, the 100 million gas appliances installed in Europe, there we need incentive programs to convince people to get the next step. And it proves it works. I mean, we had very attractive programs in Italy and in Germany, and the market was just growing double digit.
Okay. Federica, is there any country in Europe that you look to as providing a best practice example when it comes to this issue of training installers to suit all circumstances?
But to be honest, we are still working on this, Chris. I think we have a next event planned on this topic that we need to address, because we're planning to release a study specifically on this. So I think this is one of the things that we will look at. Where are the best practices that we can drop on, knowing that, of course, every country is different. But I'd like to hear also what Ivan says, because I'm sure that the dynamic enough on that one.
I would say also the curriculum of the apprenticeships have to change, and that is more a question of the installer network, their association, and the government than an industry. We do our job on educating on the products, but the curriculum of the apprenticeship program, they have to change too.
So we'll look at this again, as Frederica says, in a future webinar. But maybe there's a role here for governments to be setting requirements.
Exactly. I think local administration or city, I don't know the education system in Croatia, but I think that probably has also a role in giving, some direction. You need to have an energy transition of buildings. What do you need for it apart from the grid and so on? What kind of skills and education do you need? And I think this is very interesting because that's where the energy transition comes down to concreteness. How do you implement it?
Thanks very much indeed, Ivan. Let's turn to you and the city of Zagreb and what you are doing to try and bring about this transformation of your heating of your housing stock. And I know you mentioned to me before we started that in Zagreb you have nearly 4,000 kilometers of gas pipeline beneath the streets. And I think you're wondering whether this is all going to become a stranded asset, wasted asset, as we move towards electrification, or whether there's ways of using the existing network.
Yeah,
Please.
exactly. Hi, hello everyone from the city of Zagreb with an unusually warm middle of February for a city of our, let's say, geographic position with a seemingly continental climate, but as we go along, the winters are well, luckily, given today's natural gas prices, are getting even warmer. So as Chris said, Zagreb, capital of Croatia, the only or one of few missing countries from the EHI report, which we promise will hopefully fix in the next year's report. So based on that, Zagreb is a third of Croatia's GDP, and like Chris said, a quarter of country's population. My perspective would be primarily to take into account different starting positions of all member states. So Croatia is of course the youngest member state in the EU, with at least for the city of Zagreb, like Chris said, with a long tradition of natural gas usage, which actually goes back to 1862 for the city of Zagreb. So the goal of developing the natural gas infrastructure during the 20th century was actually health and air quality focused, because of burning, much more inefficient fossil fuels such as coal and everything. So there was a concentrated push from the local administration all throughout these years to basically further develop the natural gas pipeline as much as possible within the city limits. District heating came online sometimes in the 60s and the 70s, of course. And today, just to give you a perspective, we have 3,000, like Chris said, almost 4,000 kilometers of natural gas pipeline compared to just 270 kilometers of district heating network. So city of Zagreb, when you look at our building stock, it's mostly older infrastructure, of course. We in the city look at the problem of decarbonization through basically two tracks. One is greenfield infrastructure, so new developments, new parts of the city, new buildings. Those are, as I like to call them, low-hanging fruits, i.e. much easier to deal with. And we have specific policy initiatives planned for the next couple of years to basically go similar to Vienna, similar to other cities, to ban fossil fuel use in new developments within the city administration area. And again, those are practically no-brainers in terms of if we want to reach emission targets. If we want, city of Zagreb is the member of the Covenant of Mayors, of course. We have all those various either policy initiatives, positions, strategies. We need to reduce our emissions, and we did basically a complete overhaul of our energy and climate policy last year, and have identified the innumerable challenges on how to reach emission targets. And as I like to call it, you can't, with the flip of a switch, change 160 years of, for example, natural gas infrastructure development, and then replace it or scrape it or whatever in 28 years until 2050, or even sooner. So our goal is to basically look at a mix of technologies, all the while trying on a technical, economic, societal even level, see if we can leverage that existing infrastructure for future, let's say, energy carriers, green molecules.
Let me touch on that because I did point out that the role you're playing in the European Hydrogen Alliance.
Yeah.
I mean, hydrogen. Okay, I know people will say the old coal gas systems were 50 or 60% hydrogen. So, what's the problem here? But as of this moment, although hydrogen is being talked about quite a bit in the last couple of years, there is no place yet where it's been put to the test, a pure hydrogen heating system. Do you think there's a potential here?
We do. At least, as I like to say it, at least we want to be able to make that decision after a extensive due diligence process here within the city. Our network is 90 or more % polyethylene, the actual network. So it's 100% hydrogen ready almost, today.
Yeah, so,
of course, the issue is
hydrogen is unlikely to leak out of the piping system.
Yes, there's no embrittlement, steel issues, etc. I'm talking about the actual DSO's distribution network. Of course, the infrastructure within the buildings and the end use appliances are another matter. But my bias is to basically, we can't, I mean, I'm an engineer, I'm a technical person. I can't leave something ex ante without doing the everything needed to see if that can be repurposed for some other use. So Chris, our let's say, because of our legacy, because of our existing infrastructure, because of our climate, to be honest, heat pumps in Zagreb won't work everywhere. And given the cost, given the the building stock, let's say structure in terms of older buildings and everything, there will be a role for some form of okay, we will try to do various biomethane initiatives and everything, but hydrogen is something I think that can be used. We will see how much and will it make sense after a structured due diligence process here in the city, because our own DSO says, hey, we know we are a company with an expiration date, basically 2050. If we don't change our ways, if we don't change our technology base, if we don't see how these things can go. But I'm not a fan of ripping out, figuratively ripping out the existing infrastructure without seeing all the ways that it can be repurposed and reused for some other low carbon, zero emission future.
Okay, Ivan, I'm going to come back to you, but Federica, hydrogen one thing, but there's other renewable gases, aren't there? I mean, that you would say can be used. Are they like methane, for example? But I mean, are gases going to be available in renewable gases going to be available in sufficient quantities to make a difference? I mean, natural, the abundance of natural gas, it seems difficult to replace it with, gas from cows.
Yeah, so I think indeed there's different, and I see Peter wants to also come in. We are seeing different paths in different countries. We know, for example, France is looking much more at biomethane rather than hydrogen as far as buildings are concerned. So there will be different directions and different strategies that member state will take, and even at local level within the same member state. And that makes all sense, of course, because as we keep saying, there is a very diverse landscape, infrastructure landscape, resources landscape across Europe. So that makes sense. Now, what we do as industry is try to make sure that we have technologies that can work, can support that different and diverse landscape, so that we are not the roadblocks to the use of renewable fuels of all types, even renewable liquid fuels that are being developed today. So I think for us, the important part is we are not the roadblock to the energy transitions. We have the technologies that can work with all of them. And now we're working together with the supply chain to make sure that there is the infrastructure that is adaptable to it, that there is the supply in the places where it needs to be. On hydrogen, we are seeing very much this developing in hydrogen valleys at different patches at the moment. And we also see that this is not going to replace entirely natural gas. We don't think hydrogen will replace, one-to-one what we are doing now, but there will be different paths and there will be different areas where this makes sense, where this is available and where this is renewable. So I think we need to look long-term, medium and long-term, and keep all our options open, because we don't know what the future is, but we certainly know that there is a strong will to get to 2050 in a carbon neutral way, also for buildings.
Thank you. Ivan, you were talking about the plans being made, studies.
Peter Liese is asking to comment.
You can ask Ivan first, so no problem. So
please, Peter, go.
Okay, yeah, 3 points. So first of all, I would really like to communicate to the heating industry that the heating sector need to decarbonize before 2050. Because Chris and I, we are working on CCS in industry. We have the agriculture, the methane. There are parts of the European economy where decarbonization is much more difficult than in the heating system. So if we want to be climate neutral in 2050, heating sector must decarbonize before, first point. And then I think industry should have been proud 20 years ago to replace normal fossil boilers by condensing boilers, but you shouldn't be anymore, because that is not the future. So whenever it's possible, you need to have a carbon neutral heating system, and that is heat pumps, maybe when the local circumstances is allows combination with biomass, local wood production, for example, to get rid of the problem when you have a peak. Hydrogen will be scarce. Everybody wants to have green hydrogen, and for industry there is no alternative. For steel industry there's no alternative. For aviation, almost no alternative. For synthetic fuels, this market will be much more competitive, and your customers will pay a hell out of money if they count on green hydrogen. So that is not the cost-efficient solution, and it will be also technically difficult. So really, to trust too much on green hydrogen in the heating sector is, I think, not really realistic scenario. Then again, my question: what kind of command and control measures can we do if we don't have any market measure, if we don't have support for the people, revenues, which we use to support the people? Can command and control really do it? I don't think so. And my last point, when we speak with the member states, sometimes they have really crazy ideas. The Polish Vice Minister for Environment told me we cannot do an ETS2 because our people are using coal for the heating system. Your partners should cry out. The ETS2 is for 25, 26 or 27. If the Polish government is not able to use the huge amount of money that we send to them every day, every year, and it will be even more under the new proposal, they should go to prison if they don't enable people to use another heating system. If they use coal, nobody wants to use coal for the heating system. It's uncomfortable, it's bad for your health. Nobody should be allowed as a government to say in 27 we will still have people heating with coal. It's a sin. And you should go to the Polish government and tell them what kind of technology you have, and impose to them that the big money that they have from Europe should be spent on modern heating systems.
Yeah, I have to comment on a couple of things Peter said. We are not trusting on hydrogen. We are just saying we need all options, and we are prepared to meet all options. And whether hydrogen is scarce or not, it's a question of the demand side. And we have discussions with the gas supply side to say when there is a demand, they will be able to produce. So there are now hundreds of hydrogen projects all across Europe trying to figure out what the situation will be. So I think at this point in time, we can't rule out anything, whether it will fly in that direction or not. And one thing more, I think the easiest way to store energy is in a chemical way, whether it is hydrogen, whether it's synthetic gas, whether it is artificial method. And these are the issues we are considering. We love to convert the heating market into electric because we are all investing in new production for heat pumps. But we also know the reality. And even the EU Commission report, based on the assumption that 35% of the heating in the future, also later after 2030, will still be with fossil fuels. And we are trying to look for alternatives to place where the heat pump can't be or is not the solution. This is the only one. We just say we can't rule it out now, and we want to keep the options open. That's our objective. So.
Ivan, you were interrupted because the point I wanted to make was that the EHI is saying we're not going to reach these goals unless we accelerate the rate of renovation and replacement of heating systems. And frankly, there are many member states across the European Union that don't seem to have really got going at all. UK is now out of the EU, but I don't see much sign of progress here. Are you making any practical progress in Zagreb at the moment?
Well, to be honest, given the renovation rates in the country as a whole, there's been my personal take on it is that there's been good initiatives, renovation wave, everything else. So good talk. Unfortunately, when you look at a situation on the ground in terms of actual programs that support the renovation of both multi-dwelling user buildings or single-family homes, there's been some movement in Croatia, but not at the necessary, far below the necessary scale needed. City of Zagreb suffered 2 devastating earthquakes in 2020, and the Build Back Better initiatives have developed various pointers and recommendations on how to implement when you're doing a structural reconstruction of a building post earthquake, how to do basically a whole renovation that will include energy and climate goals. Most of it has been on a expert level talk. How many implemented buildings are there? I honestly don't know, but the rate, so the yearly rate of renovation is far below where it's needed. I want to make one point on ETS2, as we like to call it. Personally, as of this moment, I won't say that I'm against it, but I'm against the way it's being communicated and developed across the Commission and member states, because it's not clear that the extension of ETS to transport and buildings addresses the key obstacle to the take-up of low carbon technologies, i.e. the high upfront costs of heat pumps and zero emission technologies. It risks penalizing low-income households that cannot afford to invest in more expensive low carbon technologies. And of course, key for countries like Croatia, for example, is without mitigating policy, it will certainly, I will say, it will certainly prove unpopular with the public. It's unclear how the ETS will manage itself, let's say, with the effort sharing regulation and all other EU level member state initiatives. So there is much more work to be done, but I agree with Peter when he said that because of the carbon lock-in, heating needs to come off the track sooner rather than later. And when we think about developments that are being done today, we are basically doing initiatives that lock certain technologies for the next 15, 20 years. That is why we as a city want to strictly separate the construction of new buildings within the city from the renovation of existing brownfield infrastructure. One is easier, believe me, one is easier. We know how to do it. We have we have the legislative pipeline. The reconstruction / brownfield / existing building stock is much higher.
Okay.
Much more difficult.
Peter, even there is touched upon the element in the room, which is the cost factor, and the fact that politicians can expect backlash and possibly even the undermining of the climate goals if there's just simply too much dissent from our voters. Now I know the proposal from the Commission is for a social climate fund, and of course there are ETS revenues which could be distributed, which is entirely up to member states to decide how to distribute those. I mean, you must be getting backlash from your voters, or certainly your colleagues in the Bundestag.
No, definitely not. As I said, to do it together in Europe is better, is more cost efficient. So there are many member states that have a national carbon price. All the ambitious member states that want to address high ambitious climate targets and want to be carbon neutral before 2050 have a carbon price that is quite high. In Sweden, in Denmark, in Finland, in the Netherlands, in Austria, and that's the same in Germany. If you have a national carbon price, a European system will reduce costs. And it's a fairy tale that we can just press a button, do some command and control measures, and then we will decarbonize. If we want to achieve ambitious climate targets, we need to have the polluter pays principle. That's why we have ETS1. Why should that be so different in the heating or in the transport sector? Polluter pays principle is important. And to help those in need has never been discussed, Chris, you know it. We didn't have a social climate fund for Bulgaria and Romania when we introduced ETS1, and they have to pay their electricity bill, which is also not mainly, but also triggered by ETS1. So those that think command and control can do it, or we do some miracle and then we decarbonize, they just lie. And when we want to achieve our climate targets, and that is desperately needed for future generation, we need to do also some inconvenient things. It's unfortunately impossible to do it without, but I'm convinced I'm working for the next generation and not only for the next election. And I hope more and more colleagues in the European Parliament will also understand this. And I still miss the answer. Which kind of command and control measures would replace the carbon price and the targeted use of the revenues to pay the people for the modern heating system? I lack the answer.
Right. Well,
and that's the key question here.
You're saying, I mean, it's interesting for those watching this webinar. I mean, you obviously represent the right of centre, the European People's Party. You're not speaking from a green perspective, and yet you're embracing the fact that if we've adopted this net zero 2050 goal, you've got to accept reality. It's not going to be that easy, and there is a price to be paid. We need to move towards the end, so thank you for that. On the command and the control side, Federica, though, there are different governments have introduced some different regulatory requirements. The easy one, I suppose, is to say gas boilers are prohibited in new buildings. Some countries have done that. Some are now talking about saying gas boilers will be prohibited or replacement gas boilers from a certain date. Where's the EHI in this? Do you support that sort of regulatory command and control mechanism?
I mean, there are certain, obviously as industry, we'd much rather have a market approach, clearly. But we also realize that there are certain things that have to be, led a little bit stronger. So we supported, for example, the move of introducing eco-design that actually has, all but wiped out of the market the less efficient appliances. Innovation has come, and we can have alternatives for certain products like, the standard boilers that we used to have. So I think this is, of course, something that you need to balance out. And when it comes to the ETS, this is something that we see. We see the advantages of a market-based approach, like the ETS introduces. But at the same time, we need to be really aware that this has a big risk in raising, the energy bills, which are already quite high, specifically now. And therefore, it is very, very important to couple that regulation with, a clear let's say direction of where to use these funds. We need to support the consumers in cutting consumption, because if they cut consumption, if their appliances are more efficient, then they will have less energy bills. So I think the two need to go together. You cannot have one only, because then you would have
okay,
everywhere.
But in summary, the EHI supports the Commission or Peter's proposals here for inclusion of buildings within the ETS2.
Yes, provided that we have this element, because again, one alone will lead to energy prices even higher. You need to make sure that those funds that you are, those revenues that you get from CO2 pricing are devoted to making heating less expensive and therefore cutting consumption. So more efficient appliances, renewable-based appliances. This needs to be quite clearly, labeled in a way.
And if governments don't do that, there'll be such an adverse reaction from consumers that they won't be able to proceed. Okay, we finish with one quick roundup. If you're on your wish list, if you wanted industry to do one thing, if you wanted governments to do something, if you wanted commission to do something, what's the one thing you might ask for? Klaus, what's on your wish list?
Our wish list is we want a clear, stable political framework for our industry, so that we can plan and can adjust our resources to the direction the market is supposed to go. That's what we want.
Ivan?
Help us fix the regional versus national policy mismatch. An answer to Peter's question can be certainly building codes and standards. So the city of Zagreb's actually legislative package is strongest in the physical planning department and spatial planning department. So that's where, let's say, the decision making is the most at a regional level. Help us, the Commission, the member states, everyone, to further develop our goals and enhance stronger climate neutral building standards and codes, both for new buildings and for renovations, that can even go higher than the national standard. That is one of the solutions for Zagreb, at least.
Thanks, Ivan. Federica?
Yeah, I would just complement what Klaus said. I think we need to have clear objectives as industry to have a stable political, direction. But we also need to make it, an approach that keeps options open and does not, identify that one solution fits all. Which, as we know, we always say that we know does not work for Europe. Certainly does not work, in a decarbonization policy that actually works on the ground. And I think today we've heard many reasons why that approach is the most cost efficient and the better one for the consumer.
Thank you. And Peter, on your wish list, it sounds as though top of your wish list is the votes you need to win.
Yeah, but I would add one thing. First of all, I would encourage industry to think bigger. So to really put more emphasis on the complete decarbonization. I know that heat pumps are not a solution for every building now, but there are hybrid systems. There are also combination with biomass. And this is much more of the future than the condensing boiler, because 12 to 15% reduction is just not enough when we look for our targets. And push the member states. There's much more money available, not only the revenues from ETS 1 and ETS 2. We have the recovery fund, Next Generation EU. There's plenty of money. Poland should spend it for those people that use coal, and other member states should use it also to fill the gap between the high investment costs of a heat pump and what is needed to take it up in the market. And in this combination, there will be much more money available to support people than the increase of prices in ETS2 is going to happen. And only with this combination, we will do it. It is possible to give more money to the citizens to renovate their heating system and their buildings than they have to pay. And both is necessary, because we need also a price signal. And just to conclude, our main problem is our dependency from Russia. The gas price was 8 times higher. The ETS price is a marginal problem compared to that. And if we don't have a strategy also over time to reduce our dependency from gas, we will again and again be in this mess that we are now. And that's why we need to invest in energy efficiency and in renewables. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Federica, the EHI report on the current state of the heating market. If people want to get hold of a copy, where do they find it?
So we will, of course, it's available for a membership from today. We will start distributing it, and it will be available also on our website. For those who want to have a copy, they can contact us.
Okay, well, very good. My thanks now to Klaus Jesser, Chairman of EHI, to Peter Liese of the European Parliament, to Ivan Ivankovic of the City of Zagreb, and to Federica Sabati, Secretary General of EHI. So thanks for watching this webinar. And if you're not able to sunbathe in warm, sunny Croatia, then please keep warm wherever you are.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great weekend.